What if manifestation isn't failing you, but exposing the one belief you've been protecting at all costs? Most people are not blocked by technique. They are blocked by identity. They can repeat affirmations, visualize with intensity, and speak in spiritual language. Yet the moment reality does not move immediately, a deeper program surfaces. Maybe I'm not the kind of person who gets to receive. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Your subconscious does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you feel is safe to have. So let me ask you something. When you imagine your desire actually arriving, do you feel expansion or do you feel pressure? Because pressure is not excitement. Pressure is fear dressed as motivation. Pressure is the nervous system interpreting your desire as a threat. Threat to your routines, your relationships, your self-image, even your sense of control. This is why people want abundance, but unconsciously defend scarcity. Scarcity is familiar. Scarcity is predictable. Scarcity gives you an explanation for why you haven't fully stepped into your power. But abundance? Abundance demands responsibility. It demands visibility. It demands a new standard. And here's the open loop most people miss. The universe does not test your words, it tests your coherence. If your conscious mind says yes, but your identity whispers, not me, reality mirrors the whisper. Always. Not as punishment, as feedback. So, the real question becomes, what part of you benefits from keeping your desire at a safe distance? Is it fear of failure, or fear that it might actually work? Because if it works, you can't go back to the old story. Now we're getting close to the real doorway. And in the next topic, you'll see why financial survival isn't just a money problem. It's an energetic prison that keeps higher creation out of reach. Financial survival, the invisible cage. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to think about purpose, expansion, or higher consciousness when your mind is preoccupied with paying the bills? Let's be honest. When someone is trapped in financial survival mode, manifestation becomes a luxury concept. It sounds inspiring, but it feels distant. Because survival compresses perception. It narrows your attention to immediate threats. Debt, uncertainty, instability, these are not just circumstances. They are energetic states that signal danger to the nervous system. And here is what most people misunderstand. Fear is not a moral failure. It is a biological contraction. When you are operating from fear, your body prioritizes protection over creation. Your brain scans for risk, not opportunity. You cannot co-create from expansion while your system is defending itself. This is why prosperity is not superficial. It is foundational. When basic security is stabilized, attention is liberated. And attention is the most powerful creative force you possess. Where attention flows, energy organizes. Where energy organizes, reality restructures. But let me ask you something deeper. Have you ever secretly judged money as something less spiritual? If so, that belief alone creates internal conflict. You cannot attract what you subconsciously resent. The universe responds to coherence, not contradiction. Financial stability is not the end goal. It is the platform. It frees cognitive bandwidth. It restores emotional capacity. It allows you to shift from reactive living to intentional creation. And here's the paradox. The moment survival pressure decreases, imagination returns. Vision expands. Possibility feels accessible. That is not coincidence. That is alignment. So the real shift begins here. Stop seeing prosperity as greed. Start seeing it as energetic oxygen. Without oxygen, you cannot climb higher. And if this perspective is already reshaping the way you see your life, make sure you subscribe and like this video. It tells the algorithm that this conversation matters, and it allows this message to reach those who need it most. 1 year is enough to rewrite your reality. What if the version of you sitting here today could look back exactly 1 year from now and barely recognize your life? Most people underestimate time because they misunderstand consistency. They assume transformation requires dramatic, emotional breakthroughs. But reality does not reorganize through intensity. It reorganizes through repetition, through sustained direction, through daily energetic alignment that compounds quietly in the background. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How different is your life today compared to 1 year ago? For most people, the answer is not much. The same patterns, the same financial ceiling, the same emotional triggers, the same internal dialogue. That is not because change is impossible. It is because intention was not sustained long enough to override identity. Here is a truth few are willing to accept. 1 year of focused alignment is enough to destabilize even the deepest subconscious programming. But it requires precision. It requires discipline. It requires choosing the same internal direction repeatedly, especially on the days when nothing appears to be happening. This is why the 369 framework is not symbolic. It is structural. 369 days is long enough to interrupt old neural loops and stabilize new ones. Long enough to shift self-image. Long enough for the subconscious to stop resisting and start cooperating. And here is the open loop. The brain does not measure time emotionally. It measures evidence. When you show up daily, even in small ways, you create evidence of a new identity. And identity is what reality mirrors. So the real question is not, can my life change in a year? The real question is, can you remain aligned long enough to let the compounding effect unfold? Because 1 year from now is coming either way. The only variable is whether you arrive there as the same person or as the architect of something entirely new. The hidden logic behind 3, 6, and 9. Why did Nikola Tesla once suggest that understanding the numbers 3, 6, and 9 could unlock the secrets of the universe? Was he speaking symbolically, or was he pointing toward a deeper structural rhythm embedded in reality itself? In physics, patterns repeat across scales. Oscillation, resonance, feedback loops. These are not spiritual metaphors. They are measurable principles. Energy moves in cycles. Waves propagate in intervals. Systems stabilize through repetition. The universe organizes through structure. Now consider this. The 3, 6, 9 framework is not about numerology. It is about intentional sequencing. 3 represents initiation. 6 represents reinforcement. 9 represents completion and integration. When applied consistently, this rhythm creates neurological imprinting. And here is the part most people overlook. Your subconscious mind responds to structured repetition far more powerfully than to emotional intensity. Repetition signals importance. Structure signals certainty. When you write, read, and reinforce a desire within a consistent numerical rhythm, you are not performing a ritual. You are conditioning neural circuits. Let me ask you something. How often have you declared a goal once, felt inspired for a day, and then allowed the momentum to dissolve? That is not failure. That is lack of reinforcement. Without reinforcement, intention fades back into default programming. The 369 structure works because it interrupts randomness. It introduces deliberate cadence. 3 repetitions ignite focus. 6 deepen imprinting. 9 consolidate belief. Over time, the nervous system stops interpreting the desire as fantasy and begins categorizing it as identity. And here's the open loop. When identity stabilizes around a new expectation, reality reorganizes to maintain coherence. Not magically, mechanically. So the real power of 3, 6, and 9 is not mystical. It is mathematical. It is about disciplined rhythm applied to consciousness. In the next topic, we will confront the uncomfortable reason manifestation collapses, even when the method is correct. The silent sabotage behind failed manifestation. If the method is correct, why does manifestation still collapse for so many people? Here is the uncomfortable answer. Because desire at the conscious level is often contradicted by rejection at the subconscious level. You can say you want abundance. You can visualize success. You can write affirmations with discipline. But if, beneath the surface, you feel unworthy, incapable, or secretly afraid of change, the subconscious will override the request. Not because it is against you, but because its primary function is protection, not expansion. Let me ask you something honest. When you imagine receiving what you want, do you feel natural, or do you feel like an imposter? That subtle discomfort is the signal. The subconscious does not manifest what feels foreign. It manifests what feels familiar. And here is where most people misinterpret life's movements. When they set a strong intention, change begins immediately, but not always in the direction they expect. Relationships may shift. Jobs may destabilize. Old structures may dissolve. Instead of seeing these shifts as alignment, they interpret them as punishment. But what if loss is not loss? What if it is reorganization? The universe does not deliver desire into misaligned infrastructure. It restructures first. It removes what cannot coexist with your next level. And if you resist that clearing process, you interrupt the manifestation sequence. This is the silent sabotage, wanting transformation without tolerating transition. The subconscious equates change with risk. And unless you consciously reinterpret discomfort as evidence of movement, your system will retreat to stability, even if that stability is limitation. So the real battlefield is not outside you. It is the meaning you assign to change. In the next topic, we will explore how life reorganizes itself once intention becomes coherent, and why what leaves your life may be the strongest sign that something greater is approaching. When life removes before it delivers, what if the first sign that your manifestation is working is that something leaves? This is the moment where most people panic. They set an intention for growth, abundance, expansion, and suddenly a contract ends. A relationship shifts. A business model stops functioning. The immediate reaction is fear. Why is everything falling apart? But what if nothing is falling apart? What if it is being rearranged? Here is a principle rooted in both physics and consciousness. Systems reorganize before they upgrade. When you increase frequency, Lower resonance structures cannot remain stable. This is not punishment. It is incompatibility. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to pour something new into a full container without emptying it first? It spills. It overflows. It wastes potential. The universe operates with similar precision. It does not stack new alignment on top of outdated architecture. It clears space. Job loss can be redirection. An ending can be realignment. Selling possessions can create liquidity for opportunity. But interpretation determines outcome. If you label reorganization as disaster, your nervous system contracts, and contraction blocks reception. The deeper truth is this: intention initiates a chain reaction. The moment you become internally coherent about what you want, reality begins adjusting variables. Some of those adjustments feel uncomfortable because they disrupt familiarity. And here's the open loop. What if the very thing you are resisting is the bridge to your next level? What if staying attached to the old structure is the only reason the new one cannot stabilize? The universe does not respond to preference. It responds to resonance. When resonance shifts, structure follows. In the next topic, we will break down the 3 fundamental steps that move manifestation from abstract desire into measurable creation, and why skipping even one of them collapses the entire sequence. The 3 steps most people disrupt. Why do people declare what they want with passion, yet unknowingly interrupt the very sequence that would bring it to life? Manifestation is not vague intention. It follows structure. And that structure rests on 3 fundamental steps: desire,
Belief. Detachment.
The first step seems obvious. Be clear about what you want, but clarity is rare. Many people desire emotionally, not precisely. They say, I want more money, but how much? By when? In what form? The subconscious does not execute blurred commands. It responds to specificity. Precision directs energy. Now here is where most collapse, the second step: belief. Not intellectual agreement. Embodied belief. If you can imagine it clearly, your mind already contains the architecture. Imagination is not fantasy. It is preview. But belief requires emotional permission. It requires feeling that the outcome belongs in your life. Let me ask you something. When you visualize your desire, does it feel like a future memory or a distant dream? That difference determines alignment. If it feels distant, your system categorizes it as unlikely. If it feels natural, your nervous system begins preparing for it. Then comes the step that disrupts almost everyone: detachment. Letting go does not mean indifference. It means releasing urgency. Urgency signals lack. Lack creates resistance. Resistance distorts manifestation.
Think about it.
When you desperately check for results, what are you actually reinforcing? The absence of results. But when you trust the process and continue acting in alignment, you signal stability. Desire directs. Belief energizes. Detachment stabilizes. Remove one, and the structure collapses. In the next topic, we confront the element people try to bypass: action. Because without movement in the physical world, intention remains theory, and theory never restructures reality. The step you cannot skip: action. If thought creates reality, why isn't thinking enough? This is where many people misunderstand co-creation. Yes, consciousness precedes form. Yes, belief influences probability. But manifestation is not passive. It is participatory. The sequence is not simply think and receive. The real sequence is think, believe, release, act, create. Action is the physical confirmation of internal alignment. Without it, intention remains abstract, and the universe responds to coherence across levels: mental, emotional, and behavioral. Let me ask you something direct. If the opportunity you asked for appeared tomorrow, would you recognize it? Or would fear disguise it as inconvenience? Because opportunities rarely arrive labeled as miracles. They arrive as invitations, sometimes uncomfortable ones. Aligned action does not mean forcing outcomes. It means moving when movement is required, sending the message, making the call, learning the skill, adjusting the environment, saying yes when it feels expansive, and saying no when it protects your direction. Here is a principle grounded in both physics and psychology. Energy follows motion. When you act in alignment with your declared intention, you collapse uncertainty into momentum. Momentum builds evidence. Evidence reinforces belief. And belief strengthens manifestation. But if you sit and wait, what message are you sending? That you doubt your own declaration, that you are uncertain, that you are not ready. The universe mirrors readiness, not desire. Action is not about control. It is about participation. It signals to your subconscious and to the field of possibility that you are available for the outcome. And here's the open loop. How do you anchor this alignment daily so belief does not fluctuate with mood? In the next topic, we explore the power of writing your desire in gratitude form and why language shapes reality more precisely than most people realize. Writing as if it has already happened. What happens when you stop asking and start declaring? Most people approach manifestation from a posture of request. They say, I hope this works. I wish this could happen. Maybe one day. But hope is not alignment. Wishing is not embodiment. When you write from hope, you reinforce distance. When you write from embodiment, you reinforce identity. This is why your desire must be written as if it has already materialized. Let me ask you something subtle. When you imagine your goal fulfilled, can you feel gratitude now, or only after it happens? Gratitude is not a reaction. It is a frequency, and frequency determines reception. When you write, Universe, I am deeply grateful for, you are doing more than forming a sentence. You are signaling completion. You are instructing your subconscious to treat the outcome as present reality. The brain does not clearly distinguish between vividly imagined experience and lived experience. When gratitude is attached to a declared result, the nervous system begins reorganizing behavior around that assumption. But here's the key. It must feel authentic, not forced, not exaggerated. Authentic gratitude creates emotional coherence. Coherence stabilizes belief. Language shapes internal architecture. Every word carries instruction. If you write in future tense, you reinforce delay. If you write in present gratitude, you reinforce arrival. This is not superstition. It is cognitive conditioning. And here's the open loop. Why must this be done by hand rather than typed? Why does physical writing amplify the process? In the next topic, we uncover why handwriting is not symbolic, it is neurological embodiment. And once you understand this, you will never approach the practice casually again. Handwriting activates power. Why must this be written by hand? Why not typed, recorded, or silently repeated in your mind? Because handwriting is not just expression, it is embodiment. When you write by hand, you are engaging multiple systems simultaneously. Motor movement, visual processing, language centers, emotional encoding. The brain treats handwritten content differently than digital text. It slows you down. It forces presence. It creates neural reinforcement through physical motion. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how much more intentional a handwritten letter feels compared to a typed message? The difference is energy. Handwriting requires participation. It demands focus. And focus is the currency of manifestation. When you physically write your desire in gratitude form, you are not simply stating it, you are anchoring it into your nervous system. The act of writing sends a signal. This matters. This is real. This is embodied. Typing is fast. Handwriting is deliberate. And the subconscious responds to deliberate repetition. There is also symbolism embedded in the action. Your hand becomes the bridge between thought and matter, between intention and physical movement. It transforms the invisible into the visible. That symbolic translation strengthens identity shift. And here is the deeper layer. Repetition through handwriting builds cognitive familiarity. Familiarity reduces resistance. Resistance dissolves when the outcome no longer feels foreign. This is why the structure matters. 3 times.
Pause. 6 times. Pause.
9 times. Rhythm creates imprinting. But what transforms this from an occasional exercise into a reprogramming system? Consistency. In the next topic, we will explore the 369 daily activation ritual itself, why morning and night are chosen strategically, and how these windows of consciousness accelerate subconscious alignment. The 369 daily activation ritual. Why do morning and night hold so much power in this process? Because these are the moments when the gate between the conscious and subconscious mind is most permeable. When you first wake up, your brain transitions through slower wave states. Analytical resistance is lower. Identity is softer. Suggestibility is higher. At night, just before sleep, the same bridge reopens. These windows are not mystical. They are neurological thresholds. Now, imagine pairing those thresholds with structured repetition. For 369 consecutive days, you read your handwritten affirmation out loud every morning upon waking.
Slowly.
Intentionally. You read 3 lines, pause, breathe. 6 lines, pause, breathe. 9 lines. Then you carry that frequency into your day. At night, before sleep, you repeat the process. Let me ask you something powerful. What happens to belief when it is reinforced twice daily for over a year? It stops being a goal. It becomes identity. Reading out loud engages auditory feedback. Hearing your own voice declaring gratitude strengthens internal authority. Breath pauses regulate the nervous system. Regulation reduces subconscious resistance. This ritual is not about forcing results. It is about stabilizing coherence. When your words, emotions, and physiology align consistently, your subconscious begins operating from a new baseline. And here is the open loop. What if the real transformation is not the external result, but the internal reconditioning that occurs long before the result appears? In the next topic, we confront the true battlefield of manifestation, the subconscious mind itself, and why unresolved fears and shadows silently govern what enters your life. The subconscious, the real battlefield. What if the greatest obstacle to your manifestation is not outside you, but buried beneath your awareness? The subconscious mind is not poetic language. It is a storage system. It contains conditioning, emotional imprints, inherited beliefs, past experiences, and unresolved fears. It operates automatically. And most importantly, it governs behavior far more than conscious intention ever will. You may consciously decide to attract success, but if your subconscious associates success with pressure, isolation, criticism, or loss of connection, it will protect you from it. Protection, in this case, looks like procrastination, self-doubt, hesitation, bad timing, repeated patterns. Let me ask you something direct. Have you ever sabotaged progress right when things started moving forward? That is not coincidence. That is subconscious conflict. The subconscious does not respond to logic. It responds to repetition and emotional intensity. That is why consistent daily activation matters. You are not convincing the universe. You are reconditioning your internal operating system. Every time you write and read your affirmation in gratitude form, you are sending a new instruction. At first, the old programming resists. It whispers, "This isn't realistic." But over time, repetition overrides resistance. Familiarity replaces doubt. Here is the deeper truth. Manifestation is less about attracting something new and more about removing internal contradiction. When belief and desire become coherent, the subconscious stops blocking opportunity. It begins noticing alignment. It guides action subtly. It reduces fear. And here's the open loop. Why does consistency over 369 days matter more than emotional excitement for a few weeks? Because transformation is not triggered by intensity. It is stabilized by discipline. In the next topic, we will explore why consistency itself is the portal, and why missing days weakens not just momentum, but identity reinforcement. Consistency, the portal most people abandon. Why do so many people begin with enthusiasm and then quietly disappear from their own commitment? Because discipline feels ordinary, and the mind is addicted to emotional peaks. In the beginning, motivation is high. The idea is fresh. The possibility feels exciting. But manifestation is not sustained by excitement. It is stabilized by repetition. And repetition over time tests identity. Let me ask you something honest. Who are you on the days when nothing seems to be changing? That is where manifestation either strengthens or collapses. When you skip a day, it may seem insignificant, but psychologically, you are signaling something deeper. You are telling your subconscious that the commitment is flexible, that the new identity is optional, and optional identities do not restructure reality. Consistency builds credibility, not with the universe, but with yourself. When you show up every morning and every night for 369 consecutive days, regardless of mood, circumstances, or temporary setbacks, you are reinforcing one powerful message. This version of me is stable. Stability creates coherence. Coherence creates magnetism. In physics, resonance strengthens when frequency remains uninterrupted. In psychology, belief strengthens when behavior remains aligned. The same principle applies here. Long-term discipline builds internal authority, and internal authority shifts how you perceive opportunity. Now, consider the opposite. When commitment weakens, doubt re-enters. Doubt distorts frequency. Distorted frequency delays results. This is why consistency is not a detail. It is the portal. And here is the open loop. What happens when, during this discipline process, something appears to fall apart? When loss shows up unexpectedly. In the next topic, we will confront the idea that what leaves during the 369 journey may not be failure, but clearing. And your interpretation will determine whether manifestation accelerates or stalls. When loss is actually clearing. What if the moment you think everything is going wrong is the moment everything is reorganizing? During a long-term manifestation process, especially one that spans 369 days, there will be shifts. Some subtle, some disruptive. And here is where perception becomes decisive. When something leaves your life, a job ends, a partnership dissolves, a financial structure changes, the immediate interpretation is often failure. I must be doing something wrong. But manifestation does not operate through comfort. It operates through alignment. Let me ask you something important. If your current environment was fully aligned with your desired future, would change even be necessary? Probably not. Which means disruption is often evidence that misalignment is being corrected. Clearing is not collapse. Clearing is preparation. In any structural upgrade, outdated components must be removed. You cannot build a new framework on unstable foundations. The subconscious understands this. The field of probability adjusts accordingly. But your conscious mind resists because it prefers familiarity. This is the psychological test. Can you remain coherent when external conditions fluctuate? Can you interpret temporary loss as structural refinement rather than personal rejection? Here is the deeper principle. Resistance slows reorganization.
Trust accelerates it.
When you interpret loss as preparation, your nervous system remains regulated. Regulation preserves clarity. Clarity allows you to recognize emerging opportunities that would otherwise be obscured by fear. And here's the open loop. What emotional state allows manifestation to stabilize instead of destabilize? What internal posture prevents desperation from interfering with alignment? In the next topic, we will explore why detachment, true detachment, not indifference, is the stabilizing force that allows gratitude to replace urgency and urgency to dissolve into quiet certainty. The power of detachment without indifference. Why is it that the moment you stop obsessing over the outcome, things begin to move? Detachment is one of the most misunderstood principles in manifestation. Many interpret it as emotional distance or lack of desire. But true detachment is not indifference. It is stability. It is the ability to hold a vision without gripping it. Let me ask you something revealing. When you constantly check for results, what are you actually confirming? You are confirming absence. You are reinforcing the idea that it is not here yet. And that subtle signal of lack creates energetic distortion. Urgency feels like commitment, but psychologically, urgency is fear of not receiving, and fear activates contraction. Contraction interferes with coherence. Detachment, on the other hand, communicates certainty. It says, "This is unfolding. I do not need to force it." That internal calm regulates the nervous system. Regulation maintains clarity. Clarity keeps action aligned.
Think about it.
When you trust a package is on its way, you do not chase the delivery truck. You continue your day. That is not passivity. That is confidence. Gratitude plays a crucial role here. Gratitude shifts focus from lack to presence. It signals completion before confirmation. And when the subconscious perceives completion, it stops generating anxiety around the outcome. Here is the deeper layer. Attachment is rooted in identity insecurity. Detachment is rooted in identity stability. When you know who you are becoming, you do not need constant proof. And here's the open loop. If detachment stabilizes manifestation, what is the primary force that destabilizes it? What inner mechanism repeatedly interrupts progress even when the method is correct? In the next topic, we confront the only real obstacle in this entire process, the mind itself. The only real obstacle is the mind. If the method is sound, the structure is consistent, and the action is aligned, what still blocks manifestation? The mind, not the external world, not the economy, not other people. The internal narrative. Your mind is a prediction engine. It constantly scans your past to forecast your future. If your past has been marked by disappointment, struggle, or limitation, your mind will project similar outcomes forward. Not because it wants to sabotage you, but because it seeks familiarity and safety. Let me ask you something direct. How often do you internally rehearse worst-case scenarios without even noticing? That rehearsal is programming. Every imagined failure strengthens a neural pathway. Every doubt repeated becomes instruction. The subconscious does not evaluate truth. It executes repetition. This is why self-doubt is not harmless. It is creative. Fear is not passive. It is directive. Unworthiness is not emotional noise. It is architectural. And here is the deeper issue. Most limiting beliefs are invisible because they feel logical. People like me don't reach that level. It's too late. I'm not ready. These statements feel rational, but they are identity anchors. Manifestation cannot exceed self-concept for long. If reality temporarily expands beyond your internal ceiling, the mind will contract it back to familiar territory. This is why reprogramming is essential. Not surface positivity. Deep restructuring. Repetition with emotion. Visualization with embodiment. Language with coherence. The real obstacle is not external resistance. It is internal contradiction. And here's the open loop. If the mind can block manifestation, can it also be trained to accelerate it? Can belief be engineered rather than hoped for? In the next topic, we explore reinforcement techniques that dissolve subconscious resistance and tune your identity to what I call the frequency of success. Reinforcing the frequency of success. If the mind can block your expansion, can it also be trained to support it? Absolutely. But not through random motivation. Through deliberate reinforcement. Success is not a single event. It is a stabilized internal frequency. And frequency is shaped by repetition, environment, and emotional association. If you repeatedly expose yourself to narratives of limitation, your subconscious encodes limitation as normal. If you repeatedly immerse yourself in growth, capability, and possibility, your identity begins adjusting upward. Let me ask you something important. What does your daily input reinforce? Scarcity or expansion? Doubt or direction? Because your environment is not neutral. It is programming you constantly. Reinforcement works through 3 layers. First, cognitive repetition, structured affirmations, visualization, written declarations. Second, emotional conditioning, feeling the state of success before external confirmation. Third, environmental alignment, surrounding yourself with signals that normalize growth. When these 3 layers align, resistance weakens. Here is the deeper principle. The subconscious does not resist what feels familiar. The more you rehearse success internally, the less threatening it becomes. And when success stops feeling foreign, behavior shifts automatically. This is not about pretending. It is about conditioning. Athletes rehearse performance mentally before stepping onto the field. Entrepreneurs visualize outcomes before launching ideas. The brain responds to imagined rehearsal as preparation. Over time, reinforcement tunes perception. You begin noticing opportunities others ignore. You respond differently to setbacks. You interpret challenges as calibration rather than collapse. That is the frequency of success: calm, responsive, adaptive. And here's the open loop. If reinforcement stabilizes alignment, what ultimately determines whether the entire 369 process fulfills its promise? In the next topic, we examine the core commitment that activates the full power of this method and why belief, action, and detachment must converge without contradiction. Where belief, action, and detachment converge. What actually activates the full power of this method? Not hope, not repetition alone, not blind faith. It is the convergence of belief, action, and detachment, without contradiction. Many people believe in fragments. They believe when they feel inspired, but doubt when circumstances fluctuate. They act when motivated, but hesitate when challenged. They detach briefly, but return to urgency the moment silence appears. Fragmented alignment produces fragmented results. Let me ask you something precise. Are your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors telling the same story? Because the universe responds to coherence, not intensity. When belief says yes, action says maybe, and emotion says I'm afraid, the signal is distorted. Coherence is power. Belief establishes the internal blueprint. Action moves the blueprint into physical space. Detachment prevents fear from interfering with the unfolding process. Remove one, and instability enters the system. Here is the deeper principle. Manifestation accelerates when identity stabilizes. And identity stabilizes when your daily behavior confirms your declared belief. If you say you are becoming abundant, your decisions must reflect responsibility. If you say you are becoming confident, your posture and communication must align. The 369 discipline is not about forcing reality. It is about eliminating contradiction. When you repeatedly declare gratitude, act in alignment, and release urgency, something subtle happens. The nervous system relaxes. The subconscious accepts the new narrative. External reality begins adjusting in response to internal stability. This is not magic. It is resonance. And here's the open loop. After 369 days of disciplined coherence, what is the true promise of this process? Is it simply the fulfillment of a desire, or something deeper? In the next topic, we uncover the core promise of the 369 journey and why the transformation often exceeds the original goal. The core promise of the 369 journey. What if the greatest outcome of this process is not the desire you wrote down, but the person you become while pursuing it? Most people begin the 369 journey focused on a specific result: a financial breakthrough, a relationship, a new opportunity, something tangible, something measurable. And yes, the method is designed to move reality. But something deeper unfolds along the way. For 369 consecutive days, you are not merely repeating words. You are rehearsing identity. You are practicing discipline. You are training emotional regulation. You are learning to interpret loss as reorganization and silence as incubation. That is not a side effect. That is transformation. Let me ask you something revealing. If your external goal arrived tomorrow, but your internal structure remained fragile, would you be able to sustain it? Probably not. And this is why the process lasts long enough to fortify you. The true promise is coherence. After months of daily alignment, you no longer oscillate between belief and doubt. You become steady. And steadiness is magnetic. When belief, action, and detachment have been practiced long enough, your self-concept shifts permanently. You stop hoping. You start expecting. You stop reacting. You start directing. External manifestation then becomes a reflection of internal stability. Here's the paradox. By the time the result arrives, you often need it less. Not because it is unimportant, but because you have already embodied the frequency that creates it. And here's the final open loop. What happens when someone completes the full 369 cycle with discipline, coherence, and trust? Does reality respond? In the final topic, we will answer that directly and clarify the ultimate promise of this method when it is practiced without compromise. The ultimate promise of the 369 method. So what happens if you truly commit? If you practice this method every single day for 369 consecutive days, with belief, aligned action, and genuine detachment, the ultimate promise is not blind hope. It is inevitability through coherence. When you repeat a clear intention daily, reinforce it emotionally, act in alignment, and remove desperation, something profound occurs. Your identity shifts. And once identity shifts, perception shifts. Once perception shifts, behavior shifts. And once behavior shifts, results follow. Let me ask you something direct. What reality can resist a person whose self-concept has stabilized around inevitability? Not arrogance, not fantasy, but quiet certainty. Over 369 days, you are doing more than asking the universe for something. You are eliminating internal contradiction. You are dissolving doubt through repetition. You are replacing fear with familiarity. You are training your nervous system to normalize expansion. Reality does not respond to occasional desire. It responds to sustained frequency. When your subconscious fully accepts the new identity, it stops generating sabotage. It begins guiding you toward aligned action automatically. You notice opportunities you once overlooked. You make decisions with clarity instead of hesitation. You interpret obstacles as calibration instead of collapse. And then, at some point, often unexpectedly, the external confirmation appears. The opportunity, the breakthrough, the tangible result. But here is the truth. By then, you already knew it was coming. The 369 method does not force the universe. It aligns you with inevitability. And when alignment becomes uninterrupted, Manifestation becomes a natural extension of who you are. The only remaining question is this: are you willing to commit long enough to let inevitability unfold? If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Like this video to support the growth of this community and help this knowledge reach more people. And share it with someone who is ready to step into a new reality.